Hello, and welcome to Feedstuffs 365 and National Hog Farmer. I'm Ann Hess. National Pork Board's producer-led International Market Diversification Strategy Task Force, along with partnerships with U.S. Meat Export Federation, USDA, Jira, and the National Pork Producers Council, are working to diversify the portfolio for U.S. pork and differentiate the brand from competitors. Checkoff-funded research and in-country promotions are helping to grow demand for U.S. pork in many countries, including the Philippines. Joining us to discuss Pork Board's strategic partnership, market trends, and opportunities, as well as producer involvement, are Courtney Knupp, National Pork Board's Vice President of International Market Development, Dr. Dermot Hayes, economist from Iowa State University, and Scott Phillips, a pork producer from Missouri. Welcome all, and thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Courtney, let's start with you. Tell us about the National Pork Board strategy with the Philippines market and how the recent trip supported that strategy.
The National Pork Board is focused on diversifying our cuts, adding value and volume. We export almost 30%, and two key regions come to mind of our focus, and that's Latin America, but also Southeast Asia. And Philippines is a top market. We've seen a lot of momentum there for new demand. Due to the factors that their domestic production has experienced African swine fever. They're large pork consumers, and therefore they've been more apt to import, and they've turned to U.S. pork to do that. So we wanted to get in more market with our partners, especially through this USDA trade mission, to have boots on the ground and help evaluate where we can best place our investments and continue to work on this market into the future.
Would you say that strategy has been particularly successful for U.S. pork in that market as well as other countries?
It has been. It's been very important, especially for the products that we don't particularly eat or have an excess of. In the Philippines, not only do we see, offal products and variety meats, but they're also including more muscle cuts, and that's been really successful. I know Scott Phillips was able to see that firsthand in the Philippines market as they were able to tour retail and wet markets.
Sure, we'll turn to Scott in a little bit, but Dr. Hayes, I want to turn to you first. And can you outline for us the Philippines market from an economic perspective? What's the potential for U.S. pork to grow there?
Sure. It's 112 million people, a young population, rapidly growing, and income levels are also rising. Pork is their classic dish. It's their go-to food for celebrations, but also for everyday meals. They do eat as much chicken as pork, but that's only because pork is being expensive. If we had less expensive pork, that would be the dominant product. As Scott mentioned, they had African swine fever, and that showed them that backyard production is just no longer viable. That's true for pork and chickens and whatever else. And when you quit backyard production, you end up needing a lot more commercial feed, and that's the situation they're in right now. And they're already importing all of their soybean meal and a significant portion of their corn. If they try and add more animal feeding operations, they'll have to import even more corn and even more soybean meal. And at that point, it just gets too expensive to produce. When I was there, I did a survey of their producers, and their production costs are almost 90% higher than ours. And remember that we can take whatever piece of pork they need and freeze it and put it in a box and send it right to the retailer at only about 15 cents a pound. So it's the economics are good, and except for Brazil, we are the low-cost producer. Right now, the European product is less expensive than ours because of the strong dollar and because of some supply issues in the U.S. But over the long run, we are the low-cost supplier into that market.
Scott, let's turn to you now. You attended that recent trip. What was your interpretation of the Philippines market and how U.S. pork is recognized and adopted by consumers there?
First of all, pork is not just a meat, it is a cultural icon for them. So it is absolutely a part of their culture. Most of their dishes do involve pork. Pork it's essential and it's a part of their culture. Another thing is 40% of their income spent on food. That's almost unmanageable for us, where we're at like 10%, but they got 40% on food. So their food costs, especially pork costs and all that, are quite high. And the third thing I noticed is there is a significant emphasis on stunting in the population by government officials. They don't eat enough meat. and so they're stunted in their development. And it's a young country. It's got so much potential, but yet they do not have available meat supplies to feed their population. Nor, in my estimation, will they ever with their situation like what they have.
That's very interesting insight there. Courtney, following this model, this trip, what other markets, countries is Pork Board and your partners looking at next for building up business for U.S. pork?
We're very focused on Central America because we're nearing full implementation of the CAFTA-DR free trade agreement that the United States negotiated years ago. That gives us great opportunity. And with the challenges that we're experiencing in the supply chain with getting product due to container shortages back up at our ports, the proximity to our country is just well positioned to make sure that we are the pork supplier of choice for their imported product. We're also focused highly on South America. We've seen great increases in Colombia, opportunity in Chile and Peru. And as Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic, they've been on lockdown much longer than the Western Hemisphere. We're excited to get back in market, see their consumers return to retail and food service, where we're well positioned and can differentiate our products specifically as U.S. branded. It's an exciting time.
Dr. Hayes, does that kind of align with what you're seeing with the current global economic climate? Do you see those same particular areas and regions being the most profitable for U.S. pork in the next few years?
I do. Courtney mentioned Central and South America, and I completely agree with her. Not only are they experiencing rapid increases in pork imports from the U.S., but their economies are growing, and they're a natural market for us. We don't have as much competition there because of the supply chain and transportation cost issues. I will add one thing. China rebuilt its hog herd in a hurry and switched from backyard production quickly to modern production. The problem is their modern units have very, very high production costs. And so they're in a liquidation phase right now. And at some point in the future, they're going to come back. They might not come back for U.S. product originally, but they might buy more European product and free up some of those markets in Southeast Asia so we can get back into our normal market share.
Scott, let's go back to you on your participation in the trip. Philippines is a long way from Missouri. Why was it important to you to be involved, and why should other producers be involved in international market development?
First of all, in all these trade delegations, they really want to talk to a farmer. They really want to see that. They don't want to see, a USDA official or anything like that. They really do enjoy talking to a farmer. We're kind of boots on the ground, and they open up to farmers more than other people. And it's important to be involved because these are the things we do to increase our markets, and increasing value to the pork carcass, which also increases value to us. So it's important to do this, and it's very important to diversify markets. We cannot rely on just China. We've got to be able to rely on Chile. We've got to be able to rely on the DR. We got to be able to rely on to go into places where they do have African swine fever, and go in there and be able to supply pork to the crisis that they're in too. So yeah.
Well, that leads into my next question. With African swine fever's impact there in the Philippines, what were some key takeaways do you think producers should keep in mind as far as keeping the U.S. industry free of ASF?
So some key takeaways are some of the things we are doing. We have to have a good border protection to keep it out. But if ASF gets in, we've got to be able to contain it and then eliminate it. So part of a containment and elimination would be some regionalization, but a big chunk of that is going to be traceability. Traceability is going to be absolutely essential to any elimination aspect on any foreign animal disease. And the Pork Board, I'm not going to tote our own horn, but the Pork Board is working on a program called AgView, which is going to, it's specifically for traceability. So those are the things that we need to have in place in order to adequately stop ASF, and then if it gets to the United States, to contain it and eliminate it.
Great points. As we wrap up here, I just ask each of you any final thoughts about this particular trip, this market, and the future for U.S. pork exports overall. Courtney, let's start with you.
Yeah, we're performing really well in the market, and we're looking at increasing the value for each unit that we sell abroad. But at the pork board, in this interesting year where we have such high domestic demand, which is great, we have a smaller herd size. Because China's not buying pork, actually global pork trade is down 10%. And we're competing really well. I think we're well positioned, and our farmers continue to see where it adds value to our industry. They continue to invest heavily. We appreciate our partnerships with the U.S. Meat Export Federation and USDA, and our other partners as well. And this is a long-term investment. It's a crazy world out there, but we see those different instances as opportunities to best navigate and position our product, and we'll continue to do that.
Dr. Hayes, would you like to add some final comments here?
Yeah, when I went there, the first thing I noticed was that you walk into the wet markets and you're immediately faced by a face mask of a hog. That's one of their big items there. And then in restaurants and hotels, I saw a lot of hot dogs. The point being that their tastes are so much different than ours that we could take pieces of the carcass that are not in demand in the U.S. and find a new market over there. Pork fat in particular, but also feet and head and variety meats. And so that actually helps reduce the break-even cost of supplying the metal meats to the U.S. customer. It's a real opportunity from an economic perspective.
Scott, you have any final comments?
Yeah, when you travel overseas, let me just back up to the big picture here. When you travel overseas, you realize how blessed the United States is. We're blessed that we're at the breadbasket of the world. The Midwest of the mid part of the United States is just unbelievable agricultural production. With that being said, so the United States is the place to go for food, including pork, and it also has adequate energy. Those two things are necessary for society. As an example, in the Philippines, they do not have enough arable land, and agriculture is so important that their new president, Marcos, is also the Secretary of Agriculture. That shows you how much other countries put value on agriculture. It's something that's just a given for us, but for countries like the Philippines or Chile or any of those, agriculture is not food supply and security is not a given. It's something they think about absolutely every day, and it's their top economic issue. And it's just a given for us. So we are just truly blessed. But with that, we can also bless the world with our food supply, especially pork.
Great insight, perspective, and great potential for U.S. pork. We'd like to thank our panel for joining us today. For you and our audience, we thank you for tuning in. For more coverage and conversations on pork industry related topics, be sure to check out the live and on-demand section of Feedstuffs 365. For Feedstuffs 365 and National Hog Farmer, I'm Ann Hess.